Hello, everyone. I am Darian, and this is my reflection on Module 1 for race and ethnicity. I'm going to be talking about the key concepts that I found to be most interesting from the readings and connecting them to a discussion of white privilege in higher education and the different things that I've noticed at UNCW with it being a predominantly white institution and how that relates back to my experience going to a private college. So I would say that a lot of this information was not new to me. I've heard plenty about oppression and understanding racism and diversity workshops by going to a private school. And I would say what I've learned the most in this module is starting to put like actual names to these scenarios, actual titles. I haven't heard restrictive oppression, hierarchical oppression, internalized. I haven't heard those titles before. I've just heard, general. This is an action of someone being oppressed, and I think I find that most interesting because when I was reading about each definition, I was able to like be like, oh, this occurred here. Oh, I've seen this happen. And I would say that I often witness internalized oppression more than any of these five, at least at UNCW. I say this has to do with the fact that we are predominantly white. The majority of our diverse students, I think last it was 600 to 700 students that were white. And I would say, in terms of my private school going to Guilford, it was more of a hierarchical scenario that most of our student body was really diverse, but the administration was predominantly white. I really enjoyed the chart for multiple dimensions of oppression, the conscious versus unconscious, and then individual, institutional, and social cultural actions. I think this is something that could be introduced or utilized in a strategic plan or an assessment of a university to that is looking to increase our diversity like UNCW is, and kind of see what they are doing that may not be working, what could they improve on, are the issues that we're seeing in terms of why we don't have a diverse community a social situation, is it institutional, or is it individual within students, faculty, or staff. I really enjoyed being able to learn more about that. And I see that within white privilege in higher education. The first thing that came to mind was the UNCW strategic plan and how it goes for a 5,000 student increase. And I know that within a lot of the documentation, it talks about attracting high quality, diverse students, faculty, and staff, and promoting a diverse and inclusive culture. And while these numbers have increased, freshmen transfers, international students, those are all really great numbers. It doesn't really say how many of those increases are going to be people of color. It says they're going to be diverse, but how do we know that's what's going to end up happening? And a lot of the discussion I've heard from students that or faculty or staff that argue on this is that it would be within the international students, and I have trouble processing that because a big majority of international students, at least that I've met by working with the undergraduate community, they're white or they're white passing. They come from Germany, Australia, England, those areas. And I would say that if that's where we continue to diverge from these international students, and that's not going to increase the diversity. It's going to have to be within the transfer students or the first years or the graduate students. And I think that's something that, as a predominantly white institution, we need to discuss whether we are thinking about increasing the diversity and actually acting, or is our action just thinking about it? I know that we're one of the top universities in the UNC system and we're growing really, really quickly. And I think by showing that admissions is not going to hurt whether or not we focus on diversity is really something we need to think about as an underlying problem. That goes on to the problematic statements and actions. These are things that I myself had issues with and learning about and making sure I don't do it. The statement, I was raised to not see color, I see people as people. I used to be that way. I used to say that. My family still says it to this day. And I had a friend that just discussed with me one day and was like, don't say that, because by saying that you see people as people and you don't see color, that's still an act of oppression. You're ignoring their skin color, you're ignoring their racial background and what makes them who they are. So I've learned to no longer say that. Um, but it's something that I don't think people get, and it doesn't ignore that, and they don't ignore that. In addition, increasing the amount of faculty, staff, and student leaders that are people of color in a manner that glorifies their existence as a person of color. That is a big issue that I see at UNCW regularly. If you go on their website, you see a good majority of the people of color that are students all over the website, but that's not an actual picture of what it's like when you're walking on campus day to day. It's very rare when you have 16,000 students and not even 10% of them are not white. And I think these are really big things that have bothered me while attending UNCW. And I see that as a version of white privilege, because while we are trying to focus on diversity, I'm unsure how much of what we do and who we are actually caters to encourage diverse students to want to come to our university. I think compared to, when I went to a smaller private school, I was considered a minority type of student. I was a white male athlete in all of my leadership positions, and most of the time I was the only white male, and I was the only white male athlete. So I think that's something that UNCW could be thinking about, but maybe thinking isn't what we need to be doing. Maybe it needs to be more action. And I think that's something I really want to continue discussing, not only in class, but with people in real time and around the different places that I associate with at the university, because I think we don't mean to, but a lot of our features of oppression mentioned back, especially in the internalized piece of it, since a lot of the students are white, the few students we have that are people of color probably aren't going to their full advantage or trying to show really who they are, where they come from, because that's not the norm. They're blending in with the rest of the people so then they can feel comforted, so they can feel that they are welcome. That's just some of the thoughts that I have regarding the features of oppression and white privilege in higher education. There's a lot more, but the video, can only be so long. I would like to get more into detail about the strategic plan. And these are my references. Thank you very much.